DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy, family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Against the Boards. We're here for our second ever episode of the show, and this week gonna have a short little talk at first about the Amerks, and then I had a nice long, almost 30-minute sit down with the general manager of the Rochester Knighthawks, Dan Carey. So as we get ready, let's roll right into this. We won't waste any of your time. The Amerks, of course, coming off of a home and away weekend before the All-Star break last week. They won both of those games against the Syracuse Crunch, pulling out a 4-1 win in their first game on Friday and a 4-3 overtime win on Saturday. And to go along with that, of course, the All-Stars, Brett Murray, Devin Levi, heading off to the All-Star break along with Isak Rosayan. Look at the beautiful Rock the Rink jerseys that they had on for Friday. Unfortunately, I missed that one with a high school sports broadcast, but they always outdo themselves with their Rochester-inspired jerseys every season. But really, this has been the week of Isak Rosayan. Number 18 for the Rochester Americans did it all. He was the AHL Player of the Week this week with his 5 goals in 3 games. 2 of them were game winners. And then for a nice little cherry on top after the All-Star break, he gets called up to Buffalo and plays in the win over the Columbus Blue Jackets. Big time for Isak Rosayan. Hopefully for him, he gets to keep on going in Buffalo, but hopefully for us, we get to see him back in Rochester sometime soon. Their next game is going to be on Friday as they host Belleville. Again, unfortunately, we'll have a broadcast, so I will not be at that, but we will have an interview over this weekend with Devin Levi and Brett Murray talking about that All-Star break, and I can't wait to give that one to you. Now, without further ado, we head over to the Rochester Knighthawks, who, after we talked about them at a little bit of a length last week about the Riley Hutchcraft dilemma and other situations revolving around this team not being able to put a full 60-minute effort together, it's official. He's back. Rylan Hartley suited up for the first time and started against the Philadelphia Wings last week on Saturday. It was an 8 o'clock start, and I think I had the highest blood pressure in the state of New York at 8 o'clock when this game started, but he immediately got right into his groove. About at the 8-minute mark of the first quarter, he had his first big old split, and I knew everything was going strong from there. Backstopped the group to allow only 12 goals in that game, and just, I mean, the acrobatics were on display constantly. I mean, right there, just a beauty stopping the dunk from Mitch Jones, a shot that against Riley Hutchcraft was taken a lot more, proven very quickly by Rylan Hartley. He can get up and over that bar or track you down to a corner and take you out. These Nighthawks were just a completely different team, it felt like, with 49 in net. And you'll hear me and Dan Carey talk about that later on in the show here today. But overall, it was a 15-12 win for the Nighthawks, pulling it out through the second half. In the fourth quarter, that was probably the slowest quarter that they had, but they had a 6-goal difference at one point between these two teams, and they made sure that they kept a big enough gap as this one went on. And a major factor of that, Mike Sisselberger comes back to the faceoff dot, of course, after a week away. The PLL player for a couple of years for the Utah Archers, a back-to-back champion, and now with the Nighthawks in his first season in the NLL, went 18 for 30 at the faceoff dot. But the man who needs to get some serious flowers that I don't think got enough flowers right as it was happening is the man, the myth, the legend that we had on last week, number 10, Connor Fields. Now, when they release the stats for the games, it's not always official with the assists. So then someone goes back and watches replays and reassesses assists, goals, and different points like that. Connor Fields ended the game with 11 goal contributions. The Knighthawks scored 15 times, and he ended the game assisting or scoring all but 4 of them. If you had any other reason to believe that there is clearly a 1 on this team, I think it kind of opens a new conversation for us here with the Knighthawks. We talk about this 1A, B, C, D mindset with this team. I don't know. I think Connor Fields really is the 1, and there's about 3 guys that are all that 2A, B, and C. But Connor Fields is just in a league of his own the way that he's been playing this season. He is the leading all forwards in loose balls. I believe he's only second in the entire league in loose balls, and he might have moved up. He's just absolutely balling out week after week. And now the guys get to take a little bit of a breather, their first bye week of the season. So think about that. This team is 4-6, and it is their first bye week of the entire season. There are teams that have played 3 less games than the Knighthawks have so far in the NLL season this year. So definitely, I would say personally, a much needed bye week. And along with said much needed bye week, that means that we got to sit down with the general manager of the Rochester Knighthawks. Dan Carey has been with the team since its expansion era, coming from Colorado, and I'll let him get into the rest of that. So without further ado, here's Dan Carey. All right, welcome to Against the Boards. Chamberlain Bauder here with Dan Carey, the general manager of the Rochester Knighthawks. First question for you, I just kind of want to give our fans an understanding of how you got to Rochester. So can you take me back to pre-expansion, how you became the general manager of Rochester?
Sure. So I was working in Colorado. I was hired to be the director of player personnel there in 2015. I was in that role for about 2 years and then took on the GM position, I guess it was 2018. And then was young family, was kind of planning on living in Colorado in that Denver area for a long time, hopefully, and we loved it out there. We were both, myself and my wife. My wife was born in Buffalo. Her family's kind of based in Northern Ontario. My family's in Peterborough, Ontario. So it was a little bit of a travel, I guess, to get home and see family and friends. So this opportunity came up, was kind of brought to my attention a few times. At the time it was first initially brought up, I didn't really have too much interest because of the organization in Colorado was really, I was in a great spot. We had a good team, was kind of starting to become established there and really loved, that organization, the people that I was working with and for. So it wasn't really something I was looking to do, but as I kind of, understood what this was and gave it more thought and just the consideration of starting a new franchise from scratch and having that opportunity to build an expansion team was definitely appealing. And then getting, kind of closer to home with family and friends, it just, the more, I had discussions and considered it, the more appealing it became. And again, it wasn't something that I was actively pursuing and kind of came to me. And, I feel really lucky to have been in that position to, work for such a great organization in Colorado with Cronky Sports and, but also to be thought of as somebody that they wanted to kind of attract to come to this position. So, in Colorado, I was expecting to be there for a while, but, kind of got to that point where made a decision what I thought was best for, for myself and my family, and here we are today.
Yeah, you bring up not wanting to leave. That's a team that's went to the final, however many times at this point after you had left at that point, finally got over the hump of Calgary pretty much to get into that Bandit matchup. We'll keep it moving with Rochester though. So you get that expansion draft is the first kind of really personnel moment for the Knighthawks, but I'm guessing you were here a little bit before that expansion draft actually happened. So can you just talk me through that process?
Yeah, so Colorado, it was quick. It all happened pretty quickly. So we had started the season, but I had already kind of accepted the position before the season started, and it wasn't something I wanted to start the season and get into it and then have to transfer and kind of make that kind of change mid-season. So Started Jan 1 with our organization here in Rochester, and that was the time that, you know, I felt like I needed to be watching, to scout, to understand, you know, kind of from a player standpoint, the landscape, what would be available, and really kind of started to work on it from day one, you know, starting in January. So spent, you know, all that time throughout the season watching every game. I think I watched every single game in the NLL that year, and you know, it was important part of the process to understand who was available, and yeah, so it was fun. It was interesting. It was a lot of work. You know, we had a couple scouts that were working for me, but we didn't have our coaching staff at that time, right? We actually ended up hiring, you know, Mike Hazen and Pat O'Toole, those guys from the old Knighthawks organization, but it wasn't until after their season had finished and they kind of expressed interest in staying in Rochester. So, you know, there's a lot of work ahead of us, and, you know, little things that you don't really kind of expect to be as time consuming. The turf is an example, right? Like kind of just going through all the specs and everything that you have to go through to order a new turf and all that stuff. So lacrosse ops, there was a lot to it, but it was fun. It was a really cool experience, and, you know, one that has made me, you know, better through the experience.
Yeah. I feel like there's a couple of, I don't know exactly the word to use, but there's defining moments that have happened in every year for this Knighthawks team in my mind, from the players that you've drafted to certain expansion drafts occurring and other players getting brought in, or trades and different things like that. I want to start back at, you know, those first 3 years of draft picks were top 5 picks that are now all keys to this team right now, between Thomas McConvey, Rylan Reese, and Ryan Smith. So can you just talk to me a little bit about your drafting philosophies? I know the first time I ever interviewed you, you traded back up into the first round to get Austin Hazen, and it was just kind of like a no-brainer moment from all of us in the media, seeing like, oh yeah, Dan's going to go make sure that Hazen is on this team, kind of a thing. So can you just talk me through your draft ideals?
Yeah, especially early on, we were, you know, trying to acquire the quality of player that we feel is important to win in this league, and not just try and win for 1 year. It's that sustained, you know, success that every team wants. You look around the league and you've got these high caliber players that are putting their teams in a position to win games. Goaltending obviously is a massive, you know, part of success. I think more so in the NLL than I would argue any other sport when it comes to goaltending, the importance of it. So, you know, that's one that Ryan Hartley was our guy, and he was a tremendous junior A goalie. And whoever, you know, the players that were available, there's definitely some great players, and some of that, you know, have turned out to be great goalies in our league. And that was our choice. That's, you know, the guy that we were looking at, and among other guys. You know, unfortunately, he's dealt with some injuries, and we still feel like he's a world-class goalie and think that he can be one of the best goalies in this league. You know, outside of the injuries that he's had, he's had those hiccups and those things that he's had to get over, which has made it, you know, somewhat challenging for us to have some inconsistency in our, you know, situation with goalies as far as our health and well-being. You know, so that was obviously an important part of it, but coming through our drafts and the importance of those top picks, I think it's hard to, you know, to look at a quantity of players that you can potentially get by trading a higher first round pick. You know, there's depth players out there. There's a lot of players that aren't playing in our league right now that have the ability to do so and to contribute to a team. You know, I think there's parts of it that they need that opportunity, and there's sometimes that time will come and they'll make the most of it, but others it's like they're so close in caliber of quality of player that it's not going to make or break and make a big change in a team or a roster. So I think having those players that are going to make such an impact, and Rylan Reese was a guy that I knew, you know, was familiar with working with Team Canada, and you know, I knew what he was capable of, and, you know, I think he's turned into a very, very good defender. And as far as, you know, his consistency on our team, he might be the most consistent player that we have. And just you kind of look through, you know, our roster and you look at the impact that our first round picks, even the guys that we haven't picked with one of our drafts, but you trade one like Matt Gilray and Connor Fields, these guys that are elite players in our league. Rylan Reese, Ryan Smith, like you mentioned before, Thomas McConvey, they're those high first round picks or players that you can trade, draft picks that you can trade, have made a pretty big impact on our team and are going to continue to do that over the next several years. So, I think those picks, to me, to kind of sum it up, the quality over the quantity, to me, is probably a major part in a team's success.
Yeah, the next two guys that are key to me are, you brought up one right there, Connor Fields, obviously the Las Vegas expansion. To me, at least, it happened on my birthday, so I definitely think that it's more important for this franchise. But when I was watching as the entire expansion draft shook out, I was like, oh, this is the Knighthawks won the Las Vegas expansion draft, which was weird to think that something could work out that way, but it definitely felt like that. And then you didn't talk about Ryan Lanchbury, but definitely fits in that conversation of he is a top overall pick that you then go out and acquire from Georgia with, basically trading away your draft the next season to get a top player. Can you just talk me through what those two have added to this group, but then also how you got them to Rochester?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's having the right fit, right? In Connor Fields, if you had asked us or, kind of our expectations of him going into that next season after we traded for him, he scored 50 goals, over 100 points. Like, I don't know. Connor's a confident guy, and I know he believes in his abilities, and I'm sure he would maybe say that he had that mindset that he could do that. We weren't trading him expecting him to be 100 points, 50 goals, especially that year and that early. So I think it was just a good fit. Like, we had the right opportunity for him to have the success, but also he needed to just be given that opportunity. And I think it was in San Diego that he just maybe the second, third guy that he's just not getting the type of opportunities that he's going to thrive in. So, having a player that was deserving of that and had been given that opportunity from us, because we were in a different situation than San Diego. We were a younger team, and there's always that, like, is he going to take over somebody else's job that's already in that role? It's hard to do. So, for Connor Fields, it really worked out for both of us, I think, and we're really lucky to have him. And that was one that we felt like he was going to be really good for us, but to do what he's done, and again, I don't even think he's peaked yet. I think he's still where he is today, and the amount of he gets so much attention from the best players in the other team. He's opening everything up, and the guy like Ryan Lanchbury, I think, is definitely benefiting from that, right? You have a guy that is very good at distributing the ball. He's got great vision. He can shoot the ball. He's got a lot of tools. So by Fields taking that attention and Ryan Smith taking that attention, Ryan Lanchbury is having some success for us and helping us, win games and be a tough offense to play against. So again, another guy that I really believed in, and there was some chemistry with him and Ryan Smith, growing up together and playing together in junior. So that was, part of the appeal, but also knowing that, Georgia had Lyle Thompson, and he's a very similar type of player that handles the ball and is, looking to create opportunities off of other players finding open areas. So, Ryan was a guy that I was happy to give a first rounder. I think it worked out for both teams, right? To give a first round pick for a player that is potentially going to be with our organization for the next 6, 7, 8 years. Mm-hmm. That's worth it to me. And if you're in a position to win a championship and you think it's one piece to put you over, and he's only going to be with your organization for a year or two, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But we've given our first round picks for guys that we knew would be here long term, right? And Matt Gilray and Connor Fields and Ryan Lanchbury. They're not, kind of 1 or 2 years and we're done with them. These are guys that are, kind of a big part of our future as well.
Yeah, the cornerstones for this team, definitely. Yeah. Last kind of moment for this team that I want to talk about is the transition from captaincy with Paul Dawson to Dan Coates. So obviously this team's defense, when you guys first came in as the expansion team over the first couple of years was very young, and just a couple of veterans that were kind of placed throughout to bring that consistency to the group. And now we've seen all of those guys grow up, whether it be Matt Gilray, Tyler Biles, Tyler Halls. You bring in a guy like Brad Gillies into that group. So can you just talk me through being at a point as a team where you are ready to let Paulie go and let Dan take on the seat?
Yeah, and that wasn't an easy decision. I think Paul, he'd been with us since day one and did a great job for us. He was, a great leader and great captain and great teammate. I think early on we were young almost because we had to be. We didn't have a lot of free agents that anybody out there that's a free agent over the last 5 years, we called. Mm-hmm. We've really tried, and there's a lot of players that are top tier players still in this league that they hit the free agency market. We're making those calls and we're making offers, and some of those offers were more than what they signed for with the team that they ended up in. It's a challenge when it is a competitive league. Players want to win. And for expansion teams to come in and kind of say that, hey, we think we're capable of competing, they're not going to always trust that, right? They have their opinions, we have ours. So I think how we were kind of built was almost not necessarily by choice. It was sometimes we had to deal with what we had and make the most of it. As far as Paul, like he was one of those players that wanted to be part of it, and we were fortunate for him to sign with us as a free agent. And we would have liked to have more veteran guys that were willing to sign with us, especially early on. But I think it's been in the long run, a guy you mentioned, Tyler Biles and Tyler Halls, these guys that have been with us for a long time. We've seen the growth in them, right? We've seen what they can do, and building their experience has helped them become better players. So, not an easy transition to have a guy that you're captain and felt like he was, a big part of what we were doing. And, I think Dan Coates is a guy that there's just a different aspect of it too, as far as the type of leadership, and both great in their own rights, but felt like we were, as a staff, that was kind of the transition that we wanted to make. And, Coates, he's a world-class player in this league as well. He's still, he's been kind of bit by the injury bug as well, and had some tough luck over the last few years. But, when he's out there, he's definitely one of the best defenders, I think, still in this league. Yeah, and he's an on-field coach for you. And it felt like even before, when he had the A on his jersey, he really was just captain too for that group on the defensive end. Last couple of questions for you here. So we talked a little bit about Hartley, but obviously, so we had our first episode of the podcast last week, and I sat down in front of everyone and I said, Riley Hutchcraft is a top 10 goalie right now in the NLL, but he is not Rylan Hartley. And that was evident to me, at least, while watching the game last weekend against Philly. I said, personally, if this team can put together a full 60 with 49 in net, that's how they win games. And that was what I felt like I got to watch from this team last weekend. Can you just talk me through Hartley coming back into the lineup and what it does for this team, but then also just how you felt that Philly game went? Yeah, I think we've played a couple games this year that I felt were complete. Georgia, I thought we were great. They're a very good team, and we played really well the whole game, start to finish, from goaltending on out to our offense. Face-offs, obviously that's made a big difference, having Sisselberger, and we missed them the week before. But I think understanding the importance of that, we felt, and I'll get to your kind of goaltending here in a second, but we felt like we could maybe manage with what we had early on in the year. And Sisselberger was a guy that we were hoping to have, but had shoulder surgery. So it's either we're trying to make do with the guys that we had early, and then it kind of worked out well that he was cleared probably earlier than expected. And as soon as he was ready to go, we brought him in. I think Hutchie has done a very good job for us. And to go back and look at, last year, he had his first ever NL start last year. So there's going to be some kind of growing pains and some learning, kind of aspects of starting, especially for a goalie that, he's sat and watched and sat behind Nick Rose, who was one of the best in our league for a long time. He learned a lot, but sometimes you need that push to get in the net to learn through some mistakes. I thought he did a good job for us last year considering the circumstances, but you see those last 2 games what Ryland Hartley can do. And I think Hutchie, given more time, I think he can be an elite goalie in our league, and he's done a great job for us. But Ryland's our starter, and he's earned the right to do that. Unfortunately, it's not like he hasn't been playing these games because he hasn't been performing. He's just been injured, and the concussions over the last few years, and then this year with he's a very active goalie, so pulling a hammy or a groin or whatever is kind of comes with the territory. But it was longer than we kind of expected, but I think it gives our guys a little bit of energy as well playing in front of him, and not to say that it doesn't with Hutchie either, but I think just knowing what Ryland had gone through and knowing that he kind of earned the right to get back in the cage. And so he'll admit he wasn't his best. And there was a couple early on that I think probably lack of playing time this year has, maybe he would have had a couple of those saves back. But I felt like our team just played great, and he was making big saves, in the important parts of the game, especially near the end, and a couple breakaways he saved. One on Rezateris, who had already 4 or 5 on him, and makes a big save at the end. So, he's a gamer. He's a competitor. He wants to win more than anybody else on our team, as he would think, and I want all of our guys to feel that way. But he's just such a competitor and brings so much energy that. I think our team is better with him, and whether he's there to support the next guy or there in the cage, we're just better with him in general, and just proud of him to get back. It was great to see him back in the net, and I think again this is a tough league to win in, and you need a great goalie, a top tier goalie to win games and to compete for a championship, and I think he's one of those guys.
Yeah, I think throwing him right into the fire that is the Philadelphia Wings was quite the way to go with that. And I thought going into, you see him come back, he's practicing for that shoot around against Colorado. In my head, I'm like, he's such a guy of routine, maybe you wait until it's a home game to play him. And then the second he hit that split about 7 or 8 minutes into the first quarter, I was like, oh, Ryland Hartley is back.
Yeah.
And then I had a bit of a heart attack in the fourth quarter when he had a calf cramp rubbed out. But
we all did.
Yeah, okay. Glad I wasn't the only one on that. All right, last thing before I check my notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. What would you describe as your ideals for a lacrosse team? Like whether that's the way that the offense runs or the size of the defense or how you drive in transition, what would you say your ideals to build a lacrosse team are?
I would say more of the kind of chemistry and the type of people. I think just culture is number one. That's usually what comes to mind for me, and having the right people involved, the guys that are going to be there for each other and put the work in and you can trust. I think offensively having just there's a confidence that needs to be there, and having guys that are the skill level needs to be, top tier. And, I think you see it around the league, right? The guys that are having success are just those highly skilled players. And having some balance and knowing that it's not just kind of one dimensional, and playing different ways, are more challenging to play against than just having, kind of you're good at one or two things, right? So, having that balance and that that chemistry offensively, and being tough to play against because you're moving fast and you're willing to get in the dirty areas. Defensively, I think the D transition, I kind of look at it as one, and if you're making stops and you're smart with the ball, then you're going to create opportunities going the other way. By focusing on defense and knowing that taking risks isn't always a great idea, but also knowing that there's kind of the time score situation of a game, you might need to be considering kind of changing that a little bit. So I think just athletic, tough, strong defenders that are tough to play against, and you're keeping your head up as an offensive player, keeping your head up to see who's around you. You want those guys. You want those guys that you're not out to injure anybody, but you're going to make them feel it, and you're not going to make it comfortable for them. So, I think there's a lot of elements that make a good team and, make great players. But I think that culture, the chemistry, having the right people within your team that not only we can trust as a staff, but your teammates are going to trust. I think that, to me, is what we're building here. And, we have a lot of compliments from our players as far as the type of team that we have. And not like, oh, this player's very good and skilled. They're just good people, right? And I think that goes a long way. And for me in my job, my position, I would rather, do it that way and, look back. I'm not going to have any regrets. If we don't have success and I don't get to do this as long as I'd like to do it, then I think I'm okay with that, knowing that you're building it the right way from my perspective as far as the right people. I think the integrity and the culture and that aspect is really important. So, big, strong, fast, athletic, athletes on the back end and creative, skilled players on the front end make for a great team. And, everything else I think has to come together as far as the type of people that you have.
Right. All right. Last question is kind of a curveball to go into that, actually, ironically. I personally, as both a fan of this team and someone who's now watched, I think, every game in 4 years, I think Connor gets hit too much. Where does your mind sit on that, and how does this team potentially give your offensive players a little bit more defense when they're playing, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if there was ever dirty plays against Connor, or he was feeling like he was being maybe targeted a little bit more, and needed that support, it's there. I think we have enough guys that are willing to do that. I've never looked at it like he's being dirtied or targeted. I think teams will play him physical because of the type of player he is, and he engages. And you watch him; he's not afraid to give it back to guys, and he's not afraid to kind of get in their ear. And if he scores a goal, you're seeing him sometimes like kind of getting into that mental battle and that, kind of talking trash, whatever. He's not afraid of that. And I think that makes him a great player. He's tough. He's not big, but that guy can handle a lot. So, I feel like if it's never really came to mind for me, and I think part of that is the amount I've watched over the years and know that, we want to protect our own players, absolutely, but understanding that there's a way to play the game that you got to be honest, and I think he plays an honest game. He's tough. He gets in the corners. You see his loose ball stats, and he's not. If he was, not as successful there, then he's probably not getting hit as much, right? And I think the way he plays with the ball and how much he has the ball, you're seeing him, kind of take the brunt of it probably more because he does have the ball more in his stick than most guys do. So, I think if it was something that was more. Like we felt like he was being targeted, or, we definitely would address that in a way that we feel is protecting our own players. But, we got some big boys on offense too, with Thomas McConvey and Waters. Those guys they're big, strong guys that, I think can help with that too.
Soft mitts, though. I don't know if they're going to throw.
Yeah. No, hey, listen, in a perfect world, we'd have, every one of our guys would be, guys that are able to score 50 and can throw them with anybody.
But you got 4 guys that can score 50, so you better not have them throw with anybody.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Again, I think that's that fine line. I think our league does a good job to protect players too, and know that when I played, you're carrying your helmet off to the bench every other shift, and it seemed to be kind of the nature of it. But it's changed a lot, and guys know if they're being dirty and you take a high head shot or something like that, then the amount of video replay that we have, it's going to be brought up, and players are going to have to deal with the consequences. So, again, I'm one of those guys that I think it's important for us to be able to police ourselves at times. Never really felt like that, and Connor's never brought it up. And maybe this prompts a conversation that we have with him, and just make sure that he's comfortable out there. But I don't think there's a concern on our end as far as him being targeted. I just feel like he plays with the ball a lot. He's willing to get in the dirty areas. Him changing directions, going back and forth. he's taking a beating, and when he takes a shot, he's shooting a score, and guys usually are trying to finish a check on him to make him not want to do that again, but he'll keep coming back at you. So not a concern of ours, but understand that it might look that way.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that's been our interview with Knighthawks General Manager Dan Carey. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome back to Against the Boards. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Knighthawks General Manager Dan Carey. A couple of things I want to pull out of that just to talk about shortly here. First of all, Brandon Robinson is currently on the physically unable to perform list after an injury at the World Box Championships. He is a lefty, large forward with, yes, soft mitts, but not as crucially soft as those of Thomas McConvey, Ryan Lanchbury, Ryan Smith. So the prospect of having someone that can throw a little bit is still there for the Knighthawks as they get ready for the back half of this season. But right now, just some quick talking points for the Hawks. I think one of the key factors for fans as they watch this next couple of weeks, there's almost no way that the Knighthawks can lose their bye weeks. In contrast, actually, they should most likely only be winning their bye weeks. There are so many teams that have the same number of wins as them above them in the NLL standings, but have played significantly less games, that slowly, as each of these bye weeks plays out for the Knighthawks, their winning percentage is going to push them up higher and higher in the rankings. And now all they need to do is keep adding wins to that list. And with Rylan Hartley in the net, it will definitely be easier. And with the offense being able to spread the love the way that they have and spread the firepower the way that they have with Lanchbury and Fields distributing, the sky is the limit for this team. Last thing with the Knighthawks after talking to Carey that I really want to talk about is in my time around the NLL over the last 3 years, I've seen the Bandits firsthand. I've seen the Knighthawks a little bit more of a secondhand. But I can confidently say that Dan Carey does every single thing that he can to put this team in the best situation to win. He is, I've said it on other shows before, one of the most active, if not the most active NLL general manager that there is. Now, when I was in Buffalo last year, one of the things with the team was that they had the support from ownership and everyone to go out and ensure that the team was always at its best. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that Rochester has that same love from their owners, which are the same owners, by the way. However, they have the general manager that is putting in that extra dig to get to where this team needs to get to. That's going to do it for our Knighthawks talk, except I really do hope that next year we see more of the throwback Knighthawks uniforms coming back. I just needed to throw that in there real quick. With the Amerks, next week we'll have an interview with at least Devin Levi and Brett Murray. We'll have to see if Isak Rosean comes back down to Rochester before we know whether or not he will be in that interview. But going to be a big Amerks episode next week. That's going to do it for us here today. I hope you enjoyed Against the Boards.